Today we're going to be talking about what it takes to design security processes that people will actually follow. So it's not about just putting in a process or embedding a process and hoping it stays. It's about the intentional choices you make in order to make sure that it's one, fit for purpose, and two, easy to follow. So the process exists, adoption does not. So you've created a policy, it's been approved by all the right people, and it is live in the document library for people to be following. So it can be documented, approved, and still not be followed. So something existing is not the same thing as it being adopted. So it being adopted means that people know exactly what to do and it is done all of the time, or with very few exceptions, it's done all the time. So, where security process adoption breaks down. So, an access request process exists, but people still ask for access in Slack. This is a very common one. So, naturally, let's say there are people that are new to the organization or change has taken place, and when it as it relates to access control, it's common for people to still use informal channels to get things done. But you need the people in charge, so whether it's IT, whether it's a system admin, you need them to always point them back to the correct process. So, saying that, yep, fine, happy to do it, but just give me a ticket reference, for example, because the purpose of a ticket reference is to maintain an audit trail. So, always making sure that the people involved in the process signpost people back to the correct way of doing things. A supplier review process exists, but suppliers still get onboarded before checks. Again, that's something that shouldn't happen. If you have an official way of doing things, it should be the way that things are done all of the time. Incident reporting route exists, but people wait too long to report. So as you're noting with all of these, there's some sort of hesitance or reluctance to use the official channels that have been agreed. Data sharing policy exists, but people still send open links. So with all of these, you can see a pattern of there being an official way of doing things and noting a deviation from this. And the question I always like to ask here is why? Because sometimes people just don't like following the rules, but a lot of the time people take the path of least resistance, so the thing that's easiest to do. In some cases, it's laziness, and in other cases, it's that the process that's been implemented or the process that's been, I guess, the official process is not convenient, or there's some sort of, it takes something away from the user to use the official process, hence why they're not using it. And then the last one, leave a process exists, but former contractors still keep access. So with this one, this is a process failure, and it might refer to a lack of maybe like checklists or implement things that help you in implementation. So in this case, let's say a checklist. So as someone is leaving an organization, a formal checklist that the manager is responsible for working through. The design mistake. So most security processes are designed backwards. So I've got a video related to maintaining audit readiness as opposed to chasing audits. So the principle in that video was that rather than always chasing the next audit, be more proactive and have an audit readiness state. So that means that whenever an audit does pop up, you've got your evidence ready, you've got your processes ready, and you're not doing that dash towards an audit all the time. You're always ready for it. And rather than being audit minded, you're thinking of security capability instead. I'll link that somewhere around here, so you can watch that as well. But it's being designed backwards, so it's thinking of the control or the audit or the evidence that's required, and it's not thinking of the user experience. So by user experience, I'm referring to the individual that's actually carrying out the work. So think of the person that needs to request access to a system using a ticketing system or whatever it is. You need to put yourself in their shoes and consider not how convenient this is, how well designed this is. So for example, if you have a form that says request access and there's not much information on there, there's no business justification, so the individual approving access needs to come back and ask some questions or whatever it is. You need to make it as easy as possible for the individual to comply with the request. You want them to associate compliance with convenience, as in an efficiency. So for example, if they request a ticket for access, for example, and then it takes 2-3 weeks to work or whatever it is, it has to be better than the unofficial channels. Or for example, if they comply with the process and it's inconvenient or it's not done properly, whatever it is, you always need to consider it from their perspective as a consumer of the service. So whether it's the IT service or whichever part of the business. So control versus user. So what security what security designs for versus what the user experiences. So control requirement, where do I go? Audit evidence, when does this apply? Policy wording, who approves this? Approval trail, how long will this take? Exception handling, what if it's urgent? So with all of these, we always need to look at it from the lens of give them as much information as they need so that they're clear on what how things are progressing. So for example, with the exception handling, what if it's urgent? That's a very practical and business minded question. So if it's urgent, have something within the policy that says for exceptions and then give as much detail as possible. Audit evidence in the same way. Make sure that expectation of the user is clear so that it's easy to comply with and you're given everything you need. So it's a two-way thing. Adoption test. So before blaming the process, test the process. So I like to do pilots because I feel like a pilot is a good way of testing the process, working out any major kinks, because you can only see things from your perspective as security professionals compared to the consumers of the service. They probably have a completely different outlook, which is good because we want variety in this. So in an ideal world, you'll have a small subset of people from your organization, people that you get on with well, people that can be quite candid with feedback, people that won't that don't want you to fall flat essentially. People that are also quite observant so they can pick up things you might not have noticed. So in doing that small pilot, you're testing the idea or testing the new process and you're getting detailed feedback as to what works well, what doesn't work well, what problems they see occurring in production, that sort of thing. It's quite informal, but it can be quite helpful for shaping the final design. I say final design, but in essence, or in reality, you're probably going to have like an initial version one, and then after some time, as you know, you get some common requests or common questions, you add more to it and improve it over time. So let's say it's a questionnaire or something, or an access request form or whatever it is. Over time, you'll seek to improve it, but for that first one, you need to test it on a small subset. So find it. Can people find it in under 60 seconds? So in the world of like intranets or bookmarks, you can actually send out an email announcing what the new change is or what the new thing is. And then you can ask people to bookmark it or refer them to the intranet page that has it if it's like the home page or something. But just make it so it's easy for people to access. Trigger. Can they explain when to use it? So it should be very clear when they need to use it. If it's not clear, let's say in your pilot group, you find that people are not understanding when they need to use it, then clearly something needs to change. Use it. Can they complete it without asking around? So they should be able to walk through the entire process without any questions, especially if it's something that's supposed to be used by the whole organization. So if everyone in the organization, let's say you've got some people from marketing, from sales, from finance, and universally people don't understand it, then that means it needs to be reworked. Pressure. So does it work when something is urgent? So is it you need to strike the balance between something being detailed enough and then being over detailed that in an emergency is a problem. So for example, let's say you have a form for reporting incidents and it is very onerous or it contains mandatory questions that people are unlikely to understand. You want to avoid a scenario where people are putting in random characters into forms just to be able to submit it. You need to make it something that works under pressure, especially if 90% of the time it's going to be used urgently. So something like an incident reporting form. Clear owner. If people do have questions that are beyond the scope of what they understand on the form, you need to have a contact there or an email there that can pick up any queries or any information. So you could just put a couple of lines, say if you have any trouble completing this form, then reach out to person or mailbox or whoever it is. And then safe. Does it feel safe to use or report through? So is it suitable for purpose? So if it's something that's quite potentially quite sensitive, like maybe like whistleblowing or something, is it better to use an email compared to a form? It's it's about making sure that it's suitable for its intended purpose. Step one. So define a trigger. It should be very clear where the process starts. So an access request before anyone gets access to a new system or elevated permission. Incident reporting. So if you clicked, shared, lost access, or saw unusual activity, it should be obvious when something like that happens that, oh, something is not quite right. And then you need to report it. Data sharing. So before you send the customer, employee, financial, or contractual data externally, so whether it's an email, phone call, website submission, whatever it is, it should be clear in people's minds because of training and because of security awareness when the trigger is. And then leave a process. So as soon as resignation, termination, contract end, or role change is confirmed, you initiate your movers or leavers process, for example. If the trigger is vague, people aren't going to know when the process applies, so when they start being accountable for it. Step 2, make the route obvious. Hidden processes become ignored processes. So it's not enough to have a policy that is sat in a policy library. You should have supporting documents or supporting materials that make it easy for people to engage with the process. A good way to do this, I would say, is having your official policy, so people know where that is, where that lives, and then you can have like a page related to it. So maybe like incident response or joiners, movers, leavers. You can have some flow charts, just some visual aids to almost encourage people to engage with the process and see where they need to make make changes really. So bad location, so long policy PDF, old Slack message, forgotten folder. Better location, so one visible process hub and pinned links. Pinned links are very, very, very valuable. Just make sure you check them often to make sure they haven't expired or they haven't gone funny. You know what URLs are like. And then bad ownership, so no clear person responsible. We want to always have one person that's responsible for a process so that if people have questions, they know who to go to. And then named process owner and a clear route. So make it very, very clear what people need to do in order to engage with said process. Reduce unnecessary friction. So friction is where adoption dies. If it is inconvenient, people are going to leave, like they're not going to do it. So for example, too many fields, people are going to avoid the form. No response time. So if let's say they need something urgent and it's taking a week, 2 weeks for anyone to get back to them, people are going to create workarounds. They're not going to believe and trust in the process. Unclear approver. So you send a request, someone is on holiday, so as a result, your request hasn't been looked at or dealt with at all. Again, people aren't going to be encouraged to engage with the process. And then same route for all risks. So there should be a difference between something that is super high risk, so like very threatening to the business, versus something that is a little bit more informational. There should be a way of indicating that, and there should be a difference in how that is treated. Again, to encourage people to come forward and engage with the processes. And then on as like a separate note, you also need to have the capacity or practical or like almost like you need the capacity to be able to service the requests that come in. So try to make sure the process you've picked aligns with the resources you have, just so that it's done properly. Build for real work pressure. So consider the organization you're working in, consider the context, consider the seasonality you might have. So some businesses around the financial year, so end of April, things can be very end of April, end of the year, things can be very busy. So things like this are less likely to be looked at compared to organizations that have like busy periods, that whether it's October. Make sure that whatever you're designing is in line with the needs of your organization, and then also communicate with the business to understand potential milestones or other occasions that might increase the volume of requests that you receive in whichever process, just to make sure again you can support adequately. So design the process for the moment people are most likely to bypass it. So an urgent client request, this is a very common one. A client has something that they want escalated or approved or whatever it is quickly. Create a process that not bypasses the process but expedites the process. So whether that is escalating to someone more senior so that they can give the approval sooner than later. Similar supplier pressure, sometimes you need to onboard a supplier quickly, and you don't want to skip due diligence, but at the same time you need to speed that process up. So getting someone in that has the authority to speed it up, that is also very helpful. Contractor start dates, so needs fast approval and evidence capture. Mistake or incident, make sure there's a no blame reporting policy. So encourage people to report incidents by not making it a thing of blame. If your process has no route for emergency, people will invent one. So you don't want people to just jump over the process because it's just not sufficient. You want to speak to people, you want to understand, or you want them to give you advance notice that, we may have X, Y, or Z suppliers or client requests that might be coming in. Is it possible for you to create a fast track system? Make ownership visible. People need to know who does what. So requester, who starts the process, approver, who approves or rejects, Process owner, who keeps the process working. Escalation owner, who decides when the normal route is blocked. Again, having this level of ownership detailed helps people respect the process and also engage with it more willingly. Add decision points. So a good process helps people make the right decision, not just complete steps. So prompts on whatever form or process you have to encourage people to add the right level of detail or to encourage them to think in ways that they might not have thought of. So for example, access, is this admin access? Is there an end date? So make it easy for the person that will end up servicing the request to make sure that they make the right choice as well. And then supplier, will they access systems or customer data? So adding context to the request that you're making. Incident, was data shared, clicked, lost, or exposed? So again, pulling out that level of detail that makes people understand the severity of what they're dealing with. This also reduces the back and forth between the person that is servicing the request and the person that's making the request. So it's contributing to user experience. And then file sharing, is external sharing allowed? If the decision point is unclear, people are going to guess. You don't want people to guess. You want people to have all the information they need. Reinforce through managers. Managers turn process into normal behavior. So managers reinforce whatever you implement. So making sure that people understand that managers are supportive of the processes internally. There's no informal culture or informal encouragement of like using non-approved routes for processes. So for example, reminders, managers remind teams when to use the process. Modeling, managers use the correct routes themselves, so they model good behavior. Challenge, managers discourage shortcuts. So finding out that someone has deviated from process leads to gentle challenge to say this is how you should be doing it. And then support, managers praise early reporting, so reinforcing that positive behavior we want to see. And that can also include if someone is unsure of whether they should report. Again, the manager should be the person to encourage them and walk them through if necessary. So before and after, so access request process. So if this was a weekly design process, employees must follow the access management process. And then a better design would be before anyone gets into the system, so when you're responsible, submit an access request with the system name, role needed, business reason, approver, and end date. That details everything you need to do in order to be compliant with the process. And it also, rather than guessing how much information you need to add or when you need to do it, or etc., it's all detailed there. Similarly, supplier security process. So suppliers must complete security review. Then a better design would be before a supplier gets access to company data, customer data, systems or production environments, check whether the supplier is approved and who owns the relationship. Again, very clear. It's clear what the requester needs to do next and what the process is before approval. Incident reporting process. Report incidents promptly. If something looks wrong, you click something suspicious, shared data with the wrong person, lost a device, or think you made a mistake, report it immediately. So it gives examples of the type of incidents, like the common incidents that might occur, and what you need to do. File sharing. Protect sensitive information. Before sharing customer, employee, financial, contract, or internal business information, check the recipients, permissions, sensitivity, and whether external sharing is allowed. In detail, it's telling you what the types of financial of sensitive data are, and then the different levels of checks you need to do prior to sharing. So you know that before you share, this is almost like a checklist that you need to satisfy before you go ahead. So do not just matter whether the process exists. Have a look at approved access route usage. So how often are you seeing deviations from process? So whether that's in incidents that you record or in IT service meetings, how often you see it, or in audits. Average approval time. So is the process speed realistic? Is it practical and conducive for the business that you're operating in? Do you have SLAs? Supplier checks before access. So whether vendor process triggers early. So you can again, through auditing, you can check this. Incident reporting times, how long it's taking people to report incidents. So when does the incident happen versus when people actually report it. Policy exceptions, where process friction exists. And this is also something to mind out for, because if you find that there are excessive policy exceptions, then the policy might not be fit for purpose for the organization. So finally, design security processes around adoption, not documentation. Think of, always put yourself in the shoes of your users. So think of them as a customer. Does it make it easy for them to do their job? Are you a blocking factor? Are you enabling them? And lastly, make sure you're getting feedback from them. So the best process is one people can actually follow when the workday gets busy. Security process adoption improves when the secure route becomes the easiest route to follow. People create ease for themselves. They want the path of least resistance. So make sure as you're designing policies, it's in line with what makes it easiest for users. So if you need any help with security processes in terms of design or change management, I have a security awareness pack and a security toolkit for making that easy. And then if you have something more bespoke or you'd like to have a conversation with me, I also offer consultations. Thank you so much for watching.